Welcome to this week's Better Way Thursday workshop. We're so glad you're here to join us, and I'm super excited. I've got this incredible panel today, and we're talking about a topic that has been on my radar to talk about for a long time, which is job crafting. And if you're not familiar with that term, we're going to define it today and talk about what it looks like in our real life careers. So we're going to learn from some wonderful panelists, and then we're going to dig deep into some of the questions that you've asked us from the Tech Moms community, and then other questions that we know are going to be valuable as you're looking forward to building your own career. So first of all, I want to just start by asking all of our panelists to introduce themselves, and I'm going to go around my Zoom screen. Let's start with Krysti. So Krysti, I'm just going to give us your name, your current, what you're kind of doing right now, your current role, but also just walk us briefly through your career trajectory and the types of jobs you've had throughout your career.
Sure. So, hi, I'm Krysti Meyer. I am a corporate recruiter with Zions Bank. I have worked there for 18 years now. I started as a teller and have just worked my way up through the company in various positions. I started recruiting about 8 years ago. I took on the task of also doing our background screenings for the company a few years ago. So our topic is definitely something that I've had a lot of experience with, and I'm excited for the conversation.
Thank you so much, Krysti. Thanks for being here. Heather, let's have you go next.
Great. I'm Heather MacDonald. I'm a principal consultant for workforce transformation at Pluralsight. So I've been here for just over a year now. I help enterprise companies and large academic institutions figure out, what does learning look like for your people and how does that align with your business goals? But my career journey has really taken me across everything from cleaning a medical clinic to retail, being a server in a restaurant. I worked construction, nonprofit before I hit banking, and then now I'm in tech. So I am all about making those job pivots and making those changes that help people get to where you want to go in your career.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Heather. Sandra.
Hi, I'm Sandra Hadlock, and I was a stay-at-home mom for 16 years and then transitioned back into the workforce. So I actually have two jobs right now. I'm a tech writer, data analyst. And then my second job is I started out as a data entry clerk, and that's kind of segued into something more, which made me excited to come and want to talk on this panel. So I don't really have like a set title anymore because I've segued into a different position. So I've been there. That's with the OCD and Anxiety Treatment Center. So I work with data with them, and I've been there almost a year. It'll be a year in July.
Super cool. And Sandra is one of our Tech Moms alumna. And so we're so excited to have her here. And her journey is so inspiring, that home for that long period of time, just like a lot of us were, and then moving into different things. And Sandra, I'm super excited to hear about the things that you've been working on. Natalie.
I'm Natalie Clark. I started out with an English degree, planning to go to law school, accidentally fell into recruiting at eBay in between my undergrad and graduate programs. I ended up loving it. And so I worked in recruiting, transitioned into PR. Then when I had young kids at home, I got into fashion. I'm a designer as well. So I've been doing fashion design on the side in addition to my tech jobs throughout the time my kids were young. When they got into junior high, I transitioned back into tech recruiting at Pattern. And I just left a month ago to really focus on a few design projects and take a little break, and then I'll move into something new. I have a few things in mind and haven't quite narrowed it down yet.
So cool. We have like so many different industries and areas represented today, which is super great. And then Trina, the OG job crafter, career transitioner, Tech Moms founder. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, and I will try and make it quick, but it's hard to fit 30 years into 2 minutes. So, I'll do my best, but I actually talk about pivots. I actually started school in architectural engineering. So, and that's where I got introduced to computer science, took my first programming class, made it in, and just made the pivot, just made the decision, never looked back. And I'm so grateful for that. So my first job, I've done the fast food. I've done, a lot. I watched watches at one point, I've sold hot dogs. I've done, you work your way up, but ended up in a career in computer science. Grateful for it. Was a network engineer, was probably my real first tech job at Novell many, many years ago. And then did technical sales. I've been a business systems analyst. I've run product organizations. I've run IT project management. I've done DevOps. I've done resource management, contracts, legal, then shifted again. And probably my latest, corporate role was Senior Director of CX Consulting back at Oracle. So I'd been at eBay, Natalie, there for a moment. So I've had like this career where it is truly, like Sheryl Sandberg says, the jungle gym. You're just looking at what's that next opportunity and pivoting. And I just did that through my whole career, which just gave me, experience upon experience. Oh, you're on mute, Robbyn. Oh, you're still on mute.
I brought forward a sidebar when I tried to unmute myself. Good thing we're all friends here. All right. So thank you so much, everybody. I'm excited to hear more and hear some great stories about how you made some of those pivots, how you made transitions and made decisions about what you wanted to do as you were moving forward. So the title of this workshop today, Job Crafting, I created a subtitle for this, which is Turning the Job You Have into the Job You Want. And a lot of people aren't familiar with this term. I first learned about it by some researchers in the Harvard Business Review. So if you want to learn about job crafting, I recommend that you just search job crafting and read those articles in the Harvard Business Review. I would read the names of the authors, but the first author's last name is so long and really hard for me to say. And so I'm just going to skip it. So go look her up. Her first name is Amy, and read this great article on job crafting. But what they talk about is the fact that without getting permission from anyone, without getting a promotion, without having a new job fall into your lap, or really seeking out a different job, that individual workers have so much more influence and control over their own jobs than they might have ever imagined, right? In many of the jobs that we've been in, like fast food, maybe we don't have a lot of control in fast food or in retail and some of the other areas. But once we get into our more professional roles, especially at certain types of companies where there maybe is a lot of movement, they're more innovative companies, we really have a lot of opportunities to influence the work that we've done. And I use my own experience as an example of saying yes when an opportunity came in front of me. My very first job, I took a 15-year career break. So like Sandra, I was out of the workforce for a while. And when I went back to work at my first job, I got hired as a research assistant. And that was really my entire job description. I was supposed to research and write. And it was for a very small nonprofit. And my boss came, we were just a team of 3. And my boss came to us one day and said, we have not hit our fundraising goals for our events that we're going to run next fall. Does anybody have any ideas of some companies that we might want to go talk to see if they want to be a sponsor for these events? And it was nowhere in my job description, nowhere in my experience, in my background, anything. It would have been so easy for me to say, totally not my job. Of course, I'm not going to go do fundraising. I was hired as a research assistant, but I sat there for a moment and thought, you know what? It never hurts to learn how to ask somebody for money. I could imagine the rest of my career that it might be a benefit to me to learn how to ask somebody for money. I could use it in sales. I could use it all these other things. So I said yes in that moment. And I went to my dad, who was a professional fundraiser. He used to be the president of a university. So he had been fundraising his whole career. And I said, Dad, how do I do this? And so I went and I sought out a mentor and I asked for his advice. And he went with me. Like, I went to talk to someone at a company and she said no. And I went to talk to somebody else and I did all this. I had a bunch of meetings and I tried to learn as well as I could this opportunity that I had in front of me. And I always tell this story that at the end of my fundraising session, I had raised $2,000 from a single donor, and it was my dad. Isn't he the best? So anyway, I was successful. I was a successful fundraiser because I had a dad who could give me $2,000. But anyway, just I've always shared that story because it would have been so easy for me to say, that's not my responsibility. I don't know how to do it. No, right? And now I'm a professional fundraiser. I started a nonprofit with Trina and Mikkel. Like I have to raise money all the time. And I wonder where I would be now in my career had I not said yes to an opportunity that was in front of me. So with that kind of introduction, job crafting is led by us, right? It's not led by our managers. It's not led by anybody else. We make the decision. How do I change perceptions or realities about the tasks that I do, about the relationships that I'm creating at work, about the skills that I need to be developing and learning. And those are things that all of us have control over. So I wanted to throw this out. Maybe let's start with Heather. Heather, in terms of job crafting, what do you think of about that term? And there are lots of other names for the same phenomenon, right? But what does it mean to you? And how have you used this principle in your own career?
I love this. Yeah, it can come up under a bunch of different names, but I think I've been doing this since I got out of those kind of, retail restaurant where it is like you have a job, you do a thing. It's kind of set in stone what you're doing. Once I got into kind of more office environments, it really was about, can I pick up this new thing here? Can I do something else there? Like you said, stepping outside the box and sometimes taking on that special project or something random that pops up that somebody needs some support for. And for me, it was learning, like doing a lot of deep reflection for myself and understanding, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What do I really love? What lights me up? What am I really passionate about? And by figuring out, okay, I'm really good at these things, I can then figure out, okay, I'm not so great at these things. Who can I either partner with or learn from or surround myself with when I was in a people leader position? Like, who can I build on my team to help me fill the gaps of where I just don't have either the knowledge or the interest, honestly, sometimes in doing certain tasks. So it was really about figuring out like, okay, how can I maximize my time doing the things that I'm really, really good at? So I bring a lot of value to the table. So the things that I'm not good at aren't looked down as like, oh, you're not doing half your job. It's like, well, we're getting a ton of value here. I think the interesting thing that I'm seeing too is because of my role right now and working with a lot of big corporations, global companies, a lot of times ideally, these companies know they're like, we want to have a good learning program. We want to help people align to business goals. We want to grow people's career, but they're in the same spot we are going like, we don't have all the answers. We don't know everything we need. The market is constantly changing. COVID hit. There's so many things at play. And I think we have a lot more flexibility to do this job crafting than we give ourselves credit for. I think so often we're waiting for somebody to come and say, here's the next thing you need to do, or here's the tap on your shoulder to move up in the next role. But really, I think a lot of managers and leaders that I'm seeing and talking to would love to see people take a little initiative, say, hey, I want to use our benefit to learn this, or I want to do this in my role. I think it's getting over that fear of like, can I ask for this? Is it something for me? And just going for it.
I love it. Heather, there are so many things that I want to jump on, but I'm going to let everybody else jump on them too. So I won't comment, but I loved how you talked about being deliberate about your own decision-making, identifying your strengths and weaknesses, and also being innovative and taking initiative, right? So those are three things that I heard from what you said. Natalie, what are some of your thoughts about this principle of job crafting and how you've done it kind of in a general way in your career? And then later on, we'll share more specific stories.
Yeah, I would echo Heather's thought in really understanding your strengths and where you can add value, and always having that value add as the key driver for being able to craft the role that you want. If a company recognizes that you're adding value, that you're helping with the bottom line, or you're really performing this role that makes everything better, they're going to be much more open to saying, hey, you're amazing at this. And you can say, great, because I would love to move in that direction. And then it's a no-brainer for them. So really understanding that balance of, like, what can I bring to the table? What value does this add to my business or my company or whatever I'm doing? And really understanding how to like ride that line very, very carefully. And understanding that, I'm kind of venturing into uncharted territory. So I really get to be at the helm and drive the ship. And how am I going to do that in an intelligent way that opens up the most opportunities for me while really contributing meaningfully to the company or whatever organization you're in. So in my role, I do have this creative driver that, I love fashion. I've been an entrepreneur. And so in recruiting, like, how does that play out? And so I've really been able to build opportunities where I can design processes or create whole programs and partner with universities in terms of, like, I work with models all the time who are college kid age. And so I have that rapport and connections there. And so like just noticing where two worlds that seem totally different actually converge, and then digging in deep in those convergence areas and really building from there. So yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest example. I've done it in a few different ways, with automation and really leaning into different relationships and things like that, but mostly noticing where my strengths converge with a value add, and maybe thinking about them a little creatively where it doesn't seem quite so obvious, but understanding where there is the crossover and then moving forward there.
Natalie, I love that. And that's so relevant to so many of our tech moms because all of them are transitioning into something new. And so the fact that you are looked at the skills that you're gaining in your fashion world and your entrepreneurship, and then how do those translate into my day job and my more regular opportunity. And that's something I try to encourage the tech moms to do all the time. Your community volunteering, your parenting, you're taking care of your elders, all these other things, you're developing skills that you can translate over. So I love that, looking at the transferable skills to enlarge and be more successful at the job you've got, the paid job you've got. Trina, what are your thoughts on this?
So I love the idea of strengths, but I think it needs to be tied to a vision of where you want to go. Because there's so much opportunity. I think that's the one thing we see with a lot of our tech moms is they get in and they go, oh, I want to do this and I want to do this and I want to do this and I want to, and it's like trying to get like pick that one set vision where I want to go and get that clear in your mind so that when opportunities, you know what to say yes to, that's going to get you to where you want to go and what to say no to. Because you want to be very specific in those opportunities as they come up and not just flowing. Like, yes, I moved a lot, but it's because I knew these was going to get me to that next level where I wanted to go. So one of the examples I wanted to share was when I was at eBay, I was working as a senior analyst I worked in the technology operations side and then would work with our business partners in building technology for customer experience. That was my role. I was a senior, but I wanted to move more into management positions, right? And that was my goal. That was my intention. I wanted to stay in tech. I knew I wanted to move forward. And I identified a problem in the organization, which was we did not have a product strategy. We did not have an organization at the time that could really solve what are we doing and why, and we're not just doing stuff, right? Like all over the place. How do I get that organized? And so what I did in my and where the opportunity came up for me was I saw that there was a problem. I saw there was a gap. And so I put together a business case and went to my senior leadership and said, look, I can see this gap. Here's what it is. Here's what it's costing us. Here's the problem. And then identified the value I could bring to the organization by establishing a product organization. And by doing that, they allowed me to not only build the organization, but to lead it and then build the team. And eventually I handed it off to somewhere else and I went to my next management position. But I crafted that position from scratch. I identified we have a gap in the organization and here's what we could do to solve it. And it wasn't like a week. This was months of work and research and putting it together and defining it and going through that rehashing with the management teams on what this would be and developing it. But they gave me the space for that and trusted me. I had built enough trust in the organization for them to allow me to do that. So
I love that.
That was the top one for me.
Yeah, I love the idea of focusing in. Because truly, when we're in any kind of role, there might be a million opportunities that come our way. So Trina, I like that being very deliberate, saying yes to things and being ready for opportunities that you might not have expected to say yes, but not saying yes to everything, because then you'll just be kind of scattershot. And again, we talk about this all the time. Our careers are going to be long. We don't need to do everything all at once. We can pick one thing, move forward with that, see how it goes, see where it leads us. And if it doesn't lead us where we want, then we pick another thing, right?
Yeah.
But trying to do everything at once is not going to serve us well. I love that. So Sandra, what are some of your thoughts on this in the time that you've been back in the workforce, how you've been transitioning and moving back and forth?
Well, for me, it was, I think it was Heather that mentioned the communication with your managers. Like I came into my position with the OCD Center. Really, I was just looking for something to get back into the workforce that was not stressful, that I would be able to see how I could manage my family and work. And then my boss went on vacation 2 weeks after I started. She left for 2 weeks and left me pretty much like on my own. And so I just played around with stuff. And she came back and I said, hey, listen, I think we could do this so much faster and so much easier and so much more efficient. And I built, I have a little bit of a background in programming. So there's this employee point system and they give points to each other and they all add them up and tally it up. And it was my job to tally those every day. And it was taking so much of my time and it was useless. Like it wasn't furthering people's treatment in OCD and anxiety. It was really just an employee incentive program. And I built a program that would do that automatically. and revolutionized that entire program. They had no idea you could do that, and single-handedly saved it. They were going to scratch it after 2022 because it was taking up so much time. And so when she came back and I said, here's some things I think I could make more efficient and we could look at these different things, she was really receptive to it. And she was so excited because she didn't know that there were these other things out there. They're not a tech shop. They're not aware that you can do all this stuff with Excel that you don't have to do manually every day, that you can automate it. And so just communication. I approached her earlier this year and I said, I'd really like to do research. We have all this data. I'd really like to put together something to publish. And she's like, oh, that's awesome. Let's collaborate. And so that is way, way past data entry clerk level, right? But just being open with her and saying, this is a stepping stone. I came here, I'm here is because I'm getting into the workforce. I would love to grow my career with you, but it might not be possible. I just want to learn what I can here. And her being, yeah, we accept that and we'll help you do what we can. So,
that's awesome. I love that you had a leader that gave you the space to do that. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in the conversation. But also, you brought up a huge issue that we're not going to get into today, but how technology is going to force all of us, right? And it has always done this, but you had a little bit of knowledge that the rest of your team didn't have to say, we can dramatically transform this process, make it so much better. And so bringing in tools, technologies that haven't been used before, that's a great way of shifting and focusing on the stuff you want to do. That freed up your time to do the research and start writing the things that you wanted to. So Krysti, what are you thinking about this?
Sure. So I honestly had never heard the term job crafting before, but it's definitely going to be a welcome addition to my vocabulary after this, because I'm realizing this is really why I have the job that I love today. It's because of job crafting. And multiple people have mentioned communication, and I just can't overstate how important that is. Throughout my career, I've been very vocal with my managers about the parts of my job that I love, that are natural for me, that I am very, very good at, and the parts of my job that I can do, but they're not a natural fit, and I don't do them maybe as well as some of my other teammates do. And because of that, so I have a personality type that really enjoys very high volume, high attention to detail, somewhat repetitive tasks and things that can keep my hands busy, but allow me to really establish a routine that I can repeat every day. And because I really enjoy feeling like I'm good at what I do, I'm not making any mistakes, and having a set process and procedure that I can follow, that's the type of position that's a good fit for me. And my managers knew that. So in 2019, our company did some layoffs, and we had to lay off the person who was doing our background screenings at the time. And so they knew that someone from our team was going to just have to absorb that task into their workload. And they knew, because they were very well aware of what my skill sets were and what I enjoyed doing, that was something that I would like to do. And I, like Trina, had a degree in English, not in criminal justice. I had no idea anything about background screenings, but they knew my skill set. They knew that I was trainable in those tasks. And so they trained me on it. And now it's my favorite part of my job.
English majors unite. I also have a degree in English. Yeah. So Krysti, you're setting up this next question perfectly. So thank you so much for sharing that story. I want each of you to share a real specific story, because I think it's really helpful for us to hear in theory, it's one thing, but to actually hear about it in practice. So Natalie, I'm going to start with you, but I'll give you a second to think while I'm explaining this question. So I'd love each of you to share a story about a time in your career when you have either added or enlarged one of your responsibilities to make it a bigger part of your day-to-day, or where you have diminished or deleted one of your responsibilities, either by delegating it to somebody else, going to your manager and saying, I suck at this, I don't want to do it anymore, make somebody else do it, or like Sandra did, saying, no one has to do this, we can make Excel do this every day. So I want each of you to share a specific story with me about a time when you either added or enlarged a role or responsibility, or diminished or deleted a role or responsibility. Natalie, we'll start with you.
I did a little bit of both in my role at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I started out as a recruiting analyst. It was a very entry-level position. This was my role getting back into the workforce after my kids were grown. And it was really mundane, a lot of repetitive, you know, kind of like what we've heard before. And so I was able to automate a lot of that role and take myself out of it, which was great. And my team was amazed, and it was so much more efficient, fewer touch points. You know, it was just working really well, which freed up a lot of time for me to build relationships with different recruiting agencies around the Valley, to where I was working with 14 of them. We had a very strict protocol there in terms of who we could hire and the process, because it was a nonprofit and things like that. So I managed all of that, the relationships, negotiated the contracts, things like that, and really got to develop in my relationship management roles, which, you know, is something that I love. And so I went from an entry-level data clerk / mediocre analyst to, you know, being able to automate all of that. So we would just have a really sophisticated dashboard that we could look at every day. And then I could spend my time building these relationships, really taking on this contingent worker project that we had, and build that up. And it was something that I really loved. I was excited about it.
I love it. Thank you so much. All right, Trina, same question. Either adding, enlarging, or diminishing and deleting part of your job.
Yeah, there's just like you, there's so many things I want to say. So I'm throwing them in the chat as I get them. Maybe that way we can capture, because I know there's not time for everything, but one that was more of a shift and expand, because I think that sometimes it's not at the exact same job or in the same company, and being open to those, right? So I was on my career progression. I'm heading down, you know, I had that vision locked in, I'm committed to it. And somebody said, "Hey, Trina, have you ever thought about technical sales?" I'm like, technical sales? I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know what it was, but I'm like, sure, let's check this out, right? So a prior manager had ended up at Oracle, and I was at Novell at the time. And it wasn't even on my radar. And when they said that to me, which I think happens to a lot when you're out networking, you're connecting, that's the power of like somebody else seeing something in you that you can go, oh yeah, let me consider that. So I went and applied, and I knew nothing. And I know a lot of those listening feel like I'm going in, I know nothing. I have to that's why I put that in the chat. I feel like I have to know everything before I can do it. I want you to get rid of that, please, because you can learn on the job. If the opportunity is there and you have an opportunity, take it and then learn. You'll learn more on the job than you can ever prepare for, promise you. So I went and applied. They made me do like this big panel interview. Like it was so overwhelming. I just remember going, oh my gosh, but I sat up on like Google for 3 days, like researching technical sales. What do I do? How do I learn this? What do I need to talk about? They made me do this whole presentation like I was going to be at a customer, and I had to present to the whole executive team. Like it was pretty intense, but I went in 3 days before. I knew nothing about the role. I went into that and I got the job. So, you know, it's just going, okay, there's something here. I'm just going to lean into it and figure it out. And what's the worst thing that's going to happen? They're going to say no.
Yeah.
Big freaking deal. Right. But look at how much I learned in 3 days, because I was pressured to just dig in and learn in something. And so, but I did take the role and did technical sales and killed it. And I look at it just like you, Robbyn, learning how to fundraise. It's what Robbyn and I do every single day.
We're going to ask all of you for money at the end of this panel. No, I'm just kidding.
We're going to ask if anybody has donors, please send them our way. We've learned how to ask for money. So, you know, and close a deal. So, you know, I think that there's those opportunities to not shy away from and just make those shift and expand. And I took all of my experience, which was beneficial moving forward. It wasn't disregarded. It added value. Right. Yeah. So.
And Trina, I will share the note that you put in the chat that you don't need to feel like you know everything. Don't over-educate yourself before you try a new job. That is something we have to talk to tech moms all the time. We have some tech moms who've taken like 6 certificates since they finished our program. I'm like, stop taking classes, go get a job. It is so much easier to take another class than it is to get a job. It's so much less scary, but you will learn more on the job than you will ever learn taking another certificate program. So get the education you absolutely need and then move forward. So that's such a great point. Sandra, what is the time you've and you already shared a little story, so share another one when you've enlarged or added or diminished or deleted.
I just want to touch again on what Trina was saying, because when I was coming back in, like I was so apprehensive. I haven't really ever had a career I did the Utah mom thing where you get married and you have kids, and I have a degree in math, like it's there, but I haven't used it, right? And I went in and I thought, well, I'm only as good as this, like this is the only thing I can get. I'm sure of it. No one's gonna take their chance on me, right? And then when I got in and I saw just how archaic it was, because they're a psychology clinic, they're not, making up and coming innovative stuff. And I really could just spend time doing research. Google's your friend. Like I have not come across something that somebody has not figured out and has put it on Google. You just have to know how to research it, right? And so right now we have 3 different programs at the treatment center, and because the job's only part-time, there's 20 hours, and it was taking the full 20 hours for the person before me to just put in the information that they wanted for one program. And in the last, it's been 10 months. In the last 10 months, I have all 3 programs are being tracked. I have everyone that comes in asking, and they get like a little intake thing before. I have that being tracked. I have all the people who've gone through the programs being tracked. And so it's really opened up the ability to see how the program is working from start to finish, when they were just concentrating on like the most important program because they just didn't have the time or the resources to do it. And so like I'm just a little stay-at-home mom, right? I'm not nothing special, but just Googling and just asking questions and getting into the electronic medical record system and just we call it smashing buttons. Because I was so afraid I was going to break something, right? Like I'm going to break something. You're not going to break anything. Like just get in there and just mash around. And then you're the one that they come to and they're like, hey, we're going to loan you out to the finance department for a little while. And you become like a really valuable person on the team, even though you yourself feel like you're so expendable.
Sandra, you just brought forward a point that I hear over and over and over again from our tech moms. You just said, I'm just a little stay-at-home mom, right? I don't have a lot to offer. I have women, and I know Trina's like thumbs down for that idea, right? But all of us have felt it. Everybody feels imposter syndrome. Everybody feels a little like they're not enough, right? And I felt this myself. I've had so many tech moms go into a situation thinking they didn't know everything, and they get in the room within a half hour. They're like, I am the smartest person in this room. Right? Like this is happened to all of us. So that fear, like just being brave, taking the courage. And the thing that I love that you talked about is you just didn't expand your own responsibilities within the role. You expanded the role. You tripled the value that was coming from that 20 hours a week by the way that you learned how to automate things, make it more efficient, bring those things in. So your 20 hours a week versus the person before you, not to diss that wonderful person, but you tripled the value of the work that was happening by expanding it and making it more efficient and learning how to do things better. And that's the value that you brought. And I know you, and I know you're probably always the smartest person in the room. So I hope that you actually believe that now about yourself. Krysti, when was the time you added and expanded or diminished or deleted a responsibility at work?
So I'm going to go with diminished and said no, because it's very important sometimes to say no with a team player attitude, of course. But if I would have said yes, I would have done a disservice to myself and to my company. So like I mentioned, in 2019, we went through some layoffs. We were shuffling some job responsibilities. And my managers came to me and said, hey, we want you to take on some requisitions recruiting for tech positions. And I know my personality, I know my skill set, and I know that recruiting in highly competitive, very salesy type roles is not the best fit for me personally. I do very well with high volume entry level recruiting. That's my wheelhouse. So I told my managers, this doesn't align with my skill set. I will help out while we figure out like a permanent position for somebody to do these roles in any way that you need me to. I'm happy to do this temporarily, but long term, I don't think I'm the person that you want doing this position. And then a week later, they offered me the background screening position, which is the perfect position for me. So it's very important, like we've said multiple times, communicate what you're good at, communicate what you're not good at, and what you don't love doing in your job.
Love it. Love it. All right, Heather, bring us home with this question.
I love this question. First off, Sandra, seriously, like I've been both a stay-at-home mom and a working professional. I've had VP and senior director titles. I can tell you nothing is harder on this earth than being a parent. Like legitimately, the way you have to think about things, the way you're always thinking ahead, the way you're always thinking about other people, like it's such a disservice to be like, I'm just like, you're more than just a mom. Like there's so much that goes into doing that and doing that well that it's just making that relate to what somebody else is potentially hiring for. But being a mom has honestly been the most challenging thing I've ever taken on in my entire life. And we should all give ourselves a little bit more credit for that because it's challenging. It's hard. I mean, your employer is hopefully not ever going to keep you up screaming awake at 2 a.m. where, raising babies, that's happening on the regular. So something to think about. Also, I'm that person, like I'm the person in a room who doesn't have a degree, who doesn't have the same experience as my peers or the education. And it took me getting to this point in my career and now looking back at it and going, oh, having that kind of winding path wasn't a disadvantage. It was actually to my advantage so that I can be really good at what I am today. So when we're talking about expanding your role, when I was at United Way of Salt Lake a couple jobs ago, it was literally, I was hired as like a volunteer events. They had Day of Caring and Stuff the Bus. And they're like, we need somebody to run this. And maybe you'll figure some other stuff for volunteers to do throughout the year. We took that and I took on everything I could take on to help advance that role for myself, but also for the organization. So we added more events. We figured out how to fund the entire volunteer program, which is super uncommon for nonprofits, fundraisers. Like not every nonprofit has fully funded volunteer engagement programs. So we were able to do that. I took on media stuff. So I was doing live TV. I was doing radio spots. Like, did I want to go into radio? No, not give me a really good experience that I then use in other jobs. Absolutely. But it was being willing to take on those other things and kind of dabble in stuff and see how it worked. Even figuring out the PR and the marketing stuff. Like I'm not a marketing professional, but now in my current career, I can help out with webinars. I can help out with, a different, a written article or something for the work that we're doing. So it's just figuring out, sometimes it's okay to dabble in those things. I was the person who wanted to do all the things. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. But now looking back, I realized like all of those choices still, like Trina said, making the choice though. You can want to do it all, but you have to make a choice somewhere to do something and knowing that you can always pivot. You do it, you hate it for a year, find the next thing, and that's okay.
Heather, that's so great. And Trina, you put a note in the chat about being careful about office housework, stuff that doesn't bring, like if we already know how to plan a party, planning 10 more parties is not going to bring us more skills, right? But if we have not had the experience doing a radio spot, say yes to it one time, because then once we've got that, we're like, well, I can do podcasts. Well, I can do all these other things, right? And so recognizing of these little things that come up, is this going to give me an opportunity to learn, grow, expand my skills, be more visible? Like there are lots of reasons to say yes to things, and there are lots of reasons to say no to things. And understanding the difference between the two of those can really help you make more strategic decisions as you're moving forward. So Heather, you hinted at this, and this is something that's come up in a bunch of your different conversations. So I just want to throw this out to anybody if you've got a comment. We won't have everybody answer this, but we've talked about our strengths and our weaknesses. And is there a time, I think most of what we want to do with job crafting, the ideal is to say, we want to maximize our strengths. We want to go where we're the best at something. We can bring the most value, right? So when is the time to do that? And when do we say, I'm really bad at this, but I want to get better? Is there ever a time that it's okay to say that? Or if there's something we're really bad at, should we always just say, I'm going to put that off to somebody else. I'm not going to learn it. Has any of you had an experience with that you think that might be interesting or relevant to this conversation?
I have one. I can go.
Go ahead, Krysti.
Okay, so we really started focusing on our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in 2020, and we started a bunch of employee business resource groups. And I am very passionate about working with people that have disabilities, mental illnesses, and chronic conditions, bringing them into our company and also making them feel included in our company, making sure they have the resources that they need. So I actually spoke with my manager because she was like, what kind of DE&I are you interested in? And I told her what I'm passionate about, why I'm passionate about it, the way these areas have impacted my own life. And so we opened up our disability mental illness chronic condition forum that year, and they asked who wants to chair this, and my manager said, hey, I have the perfect person. And so it definitely put me outside of my comfort zone. I was regularly having to speak on our executive calls, which is very intimidating if it's not something that you've done before. I've had to get our CFO to buy into different mental health resources for our and invest several $1,000s in that. And so that was a great experience for me. It was challenging. It pushed me outside my comfort zone, but I'm so glad that I said yes, and that my manager knew that it was something I was interested in and nominated me for it.
I love it. And that's a perfect example, because it would be easy to say, I'm not a good public speaker, I'm going to turn that over to somebody else, right? Somebody else is already a great public speaker, they'll do it all. But if it's something where you imagine it can bring you growth, it might open new opportunities for you, that's a time to say, even though this isn't my strength, I want to turn it into a strength. Okay. Trina, you had another example?
Yeah, and it's a mix of saying no and then getting, I put in here, get comfortable being uncomfortable, because this is when I went from corporate to doing my own business. Talk about discomfort every single freaking day. Okay, so, but how that happened, and it was a longer journey, so I'll shorten the story. I had my senior VP came to me, called me into the office one day and said, okay, Trina, we're going to take your global team and we're going to divide them up and we're going to disperse them across all these other teams, and then we're going to put you here. My response was, no, I'm not going to do that. And they got really flustered. They're like, what do you mean you're not going to do it? Right? Like, what do you mean? We planned this all out. David said, we've talked to you. And I'm like, you didn't talk to me about this. You just like me. You're going to go do all this. I was not involved in this whole discussion. Long story short, I ended up working through this with them, but I left the company. But after I transitioned, I put together, I'm like, here's what you need to do. If you would have pulled me in, I would have helped you with all this to start with. Let me divide it all up. I transitioned all these managers and I left. It led me, though, to be able to stay on that path that we're talking about of, okay, I knew there was something bigger than what I was doing right then. I didn't know what it was, but I had to stick to that I knew was there and say, okay, something's coming. I've got to make, this wasn't the right thing. I knew it. What is that next thing? And start going down that path, regardless of how how uncomfortable it was. And, over that year, that's how Tech Moms came into play right then. I started launching, we started doing fundraising, we started putting the nonprofit together. Just like it all came from that one powerful saying no, because if I would have said yes and still been in that position, none of us would be sitting here right now.
That's true. That's true.
It's sometimes you can look back and decipher those things, but in the moment they're just scary, right? It's super scary. So that's why I always am talking about what is it that you want to go to, so that when those come up, you can make those pivots and then expand and take all that experience that I built for 30 years to do what we're doing today.
So let's think of a time when we needed somebody's permission, right? To do the job crafting, the pivots, the expanding or the diminishing that we wanted to do. So where we needed a manager's position to do it, where we needed access to resources from within the company, where we couldn't do it on our own. Who wants to share a time where they needed permission, resources, access in order to do the job crafting that they wanted to do? Let's start with Sandra.
Well, I'm right in the middle of that right now. So a few months ago, I came across Google has a collab. It's called Collab, and it's a Python environment in Google, and it's a lot like the Google documents and the Google Sheets. You can share it between people, and I was like, this is gonna be life-changing. Like, I'm going to be able to do so much with this data, and we'll be able to like get all of this insight. And I was so excited because I forgot to mention, in the process of this job, I've also I fell in love with data and got accepted into a master's program for data science. So I'm going to school and I'm learning like more Python and more R and all this stuff. And I was like, I can bring this to my job. And I'm jumping up and down, and we cognizant of HIPAA laws. So I emailed the IT department and I said, is Google Colab, is that on our Google Suite? Can we use that? And they email back and they're like, it's not HIPAA compliant, and they shut everything down. And I was like, oh, okay. So now I'm in the process of like, I'm going to have to go to my manager and be like, I need to load Python, and here's why, and here's what we can do, and here's all the cool stuff we can do with it. But I have to convince them because this is new to them. This is not, they didn't think any of this was possible. And so I'm in the process of like trying to get IT to let me load things on my computer, because it's a very, they run a very tight ship, as they should. And so my biggest takeaway is not to get deterred. Like right now I've figured workarounds in Excel to do a lot, not all that I want to, but to tell, to kind of give them a taste of like, here's what we could do if we had something that managed the data a little bit better, and I think we'll get there. We got time. I don't need to do it all this week. And so, and that's my biggest thing, is just convincing them that, we could really do some really cool stuff with this.
Awesome. Krysti, tell us a time. And you know what? Let me have you answer one of two questions. Either a time where you did need permission, resources, or where you didn't. So you did it with permission, or you did it without permission.
Sure. So like I mentioned, I did the background screenings for our company. And in 2020, we ran into quite a snag because to get rap sheets from the FBI, there's federal regulations, that people have to go in and physically submit a set of fingerprints for us to get those results back. And during the pandemic, our fingerprinting locations had extremely limited hours because they had to follow very strict protocols around how many people could be in any building at any given time. Sites were closing left and right because they'd have an outbreak in their office. And so we were just at a standstill as far as hiring people because we couldn't get them fingerprinted, so we couldn't run their background screenings. And so I had to reach out to my manager, as well as the people with our vendor who work with the FBI, and say, hey, when people can't physically fingerprint, because some people just have really shallow prints that just don't take. And in that case, the FBI makes us have them try to print twice, and then they will manually run their criminal history with their name and social and send us the results. And so I said, hey, temporarily, for a couple of months while we get through this pandemic, which ended up being a lot more than a couple of months, can we manually run these? And then as soon as the sites open back up, I will have them go in and manually fingerprint, and I will track all of that, and I will do that. And thank goodness they allowed us to do it, because we were like, our company was coming to a screeching halt because we didn't have people to do the jobs that we needed done. And we were already struggling keeping enough staff, throughout the pandemic as it was.
Thank you so much. Heather, when was a time when you either needed permission or didn't need permission to JobCraft?
I'm absolutely the queen of like, ask for forgiveness and then instead of permission. But I also realize, like, looking back on my career, is I've gotten to the point where I'm confident enough, like I've seen enough stuff to feel confident. If I make this decision and I have a logical rationale for it, I'm willing to stand behind the impact of whatever that decision is. So I think the comfort in being able to beg for forgiveness later comes with the experience of being able to say, I'm going to stand behind myself. And if I make a mistake, I'm going to learn for it. If something screws up and it doesn't work out the way I intended, I'm going to be accountable for those decisions. So I think it's learning how to balance, like, what you bring to the table matters. Your experience matters. It's like that whole thing of like, just a mom. It's like, yeah, but as a mom, you've seen so much. As anybody in any job, you've seen something different, and all of our perspectives that come to the table matter. And I think especially when you're like, oh, I've only worked retail, or I've only worked in, fast food. The thing is, like, you have a completely different perspective on what's happening in your business than people who grew up in the business. Like, I constantly was in spaces where people around me were like, oh, I knew I wanted to do this since college. I've been doing this for 25 years. And I'm like, I just started. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I have a completely different perspective that can help you change the game. So I think for me, it's always just been like figuring out, okay, how can I just push the boundaries a little bit and see what I can do? And also being willing to advocate for myself and for my team. So sometimes it's just been going out and saying, hey, I noticed this person is doing this, report every single month. Nobody's reading it. Nobody's filling out the survey that's associated with it. Can we stop doing this? And sometimes you do ask for that permission, and you get permission to be like, let's clear that off your plate so that I can put something more important and more relevant on it that supports your development and what our business needs too.
So through your experience, you've been able to develop confidence in your own judgment to say, I'm just going to plow forward with this. And if someone comes back to me, I have the rationale, I understand why I did it, and I can say it was the right thing to do.
Yes, and I will never make a decision that's going to tank our business, that's not ethical, that's, a multi-million-dollar, like it's going to destroy our credibility. Like I also think about that, like the reputational damage that can happen if you make a wrong decision. It's risk mitigation. You have to weigh the costs and benefits and understand, is this something I can run forward? Or do I really need to say, I'm sorry, we have to push pause until the CEO, the CFO, whoever shows back up, and you can run it by them.
All right, Trina, I'm going to put all your good stuff in the chat. I'm going to put it in the notes of this YouTube so everyone can watch them all. Trina, when was the time when you needed permission or you didn't need permission?
I'm going to probably stick to current present, because I think that there's applicability, right? If I go back in my career, there was those moments where there were things that I did ask permission. There's times you don't. You've got to navigate one way or another, and that's why I put in the chat, just you've got to understand the environment you're within. Some cultures are very tolerant of risk, and some are like zero, like you do this and that's it. And you just need to be aware everybody's going to be coming from a different place, a different culture, a different manager, just different scenario. So just take stock of what environment you're in. And if there are things that you want to do, start building that rapport with your manager to be able to say, hey, I do have ideas. How open are you to these? And like, just start building that is where I would say. I'm taking risks all the time and not asking permission, but there's times where I do have to, especially as the work I do now and the consulting work I do. So I have a consulting company where I do culture consulting. And as I'm working with my clients, that's one where I'm always going to have to ask permission, right? It's a must. You can't just go do stuff, right? So I've learned how to seek permission quickly and effectively. So I'm going to focus on that permission side, because there's some environments where you really have to go in. Here's what we're going to do. Here's why we're going to do it. Here's when we're going to do it. Here's who I need for it. Here's the budget I need for it. And the more clarity you can bring to those permission asks before just going in with a problem, come in with the solution and why, and then move it forward. And I think that process of asking permission, you start to build it as a skill set, and it's a needed one. And that way you can make effective change faster.
Thank you. Natalie.
Yeah, I would also add to Trina's comment, the easier you can make it for people to say yes, that is such a skill. And present data, present opportunities, and say like, this is a no-brainer, then obviously they'll be like, yes, we're on board. It's exciting. And it is such an important skill set to build, whether it's for a company initiative, whether it's presenting yourself as a viable candidate for something new to do. There's so many applications for that concept, which I think is so important to learn and so valuable. One thing that was cool at the church, we had very, very low applicant diversity. We had 97% of one group and 3% of all the other groups. And I really wanted to move the needle there. And so I did have to ask for a lot of permission. That is the most bureaucratic organization I've ever been part of. And so like, not only did we need all the managers, but I think we needed God's permission as well. So, like it was lots of levels of approval. And I had to do the same thing. I wanted to use an AI tool to analyze our job descriptions to see if that could help increase our applicant pool and our diversity. So I had to present the case, get the data. This is the cost. This is how it could potentially affect us. And really had to work hard to move it up those levels of approval. I was able to do it quite quickly, like in a month or two. I used the tool, and in 10 months, I increased our candidate diversity by 350%. So it was really, really exciting for me. It was worth the effort to get the permission, and fun to see that the research I had done, the effort I had put in to say, this is why it's going to be really good for us. And then it panned out even better than I had hoped. That was so satisfying and really worth the effort.
So cool. All right. We have 30 seconds left for each of you. 30 seconds. We got to end right on time. So I want each of you to give one piece of advice for a woman who's looking to expand, or she's looking to do some job crafting, right? The advice is along the lines of, how do you identify what you need to do next? How do you figure out what you should be expanding, what you should be contracting, or what you should be changing in order to get to the next step? So one piece of advice, I'm going to start with Heather.
All right. I think my piece of advice would be lean on the people around you, lean on your mentors, your sponsors, the people who have been there before you, and get their advice. Like, I realized looking back in my career, I was consistent. Someone, I think Trina said it, someone saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and I took the leap of faith and made that pivot. Sometimes it's just about talking to somebody who knows you well, or who's, in your same career field, to say, I'm looking to advance, but I don't know how. They might be able to bring you that insight that they have in being a little bit further on the path than you, to say, here's what I did, or here's some ideas, some suggestions. If you can find that little thing where, again, like, you can ask for permission because there's data, there's something else, like, start there and then work your way out.
Love it. Thank you. Trina, 30 seconds, one piece of advice.
I'm going to say go to our Better Way Thursday YouTube channel and listen to Heather MacDonald's webinar on informational interviewing. Heather, you have no idea how many of, all of them we've given it to, but I still give it to even people that aren't tech moms to listen to. So incredible webinar on how to do informational interviewing. Once you identify career paths you want to go down, go interview the individuals and get that vision solidified in your mind through that process.
Informational interviewing, so powerful. I love it. Sandra, one piece of advice.
My piece of advice, if there is a part of your job that you are drawn to, that you love.
I've got Sandra frozen. Okay, I'm going to go to Natalie. We'll come back to Sandra.
I think it's so important to keep the possibilities open. Never tell yourself, I could never get there. Like, always say, I can get there, even if I don't know how yet. It is possible. It will happen. I will get there. Just the ability we have to create opportunities, energy, all of it is so important. And we have so much control over it, I think, more than we even realize. So believe that it's possible, and it will be.
The belief and the confidence. I love that so much. Okay, Krysti, bring us home. 30 seconds. One piece of advice.
I would say, even if you're not in your forever job yet, do the best job you can in that job, because you don't know what opportunities that's going to open for you. Like I said, I worked at Zions for 18 years. I applied for 2 of those positions, and I've been in 7 of my own volition. Every other time I've been invited to apply by the hiring managers or someone else on the team, because they knew my skill set from the work that I'd done before.
I love it. Everybody, thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation. As Trina mentioned before, check out our other Better Way Thursday workshops. We have them on so many great topics, and I'm excited to see all the rest of you as you move forward and continue to grow beautiful and amazing careers, and as well for all of our tech moms. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.